Welcome to Unposted, a series on my YouTube channel that takes on topics which I think are too thoughtful, too layered, or simply too real to survive the LinkedIn algorithm. This is a conversation space for coaches and leaders to engage in smart, spicy discourse that prioritizes lived experience and informed takes with zero tolerance for cheap shots. I'm Mariana, a first generation professional, talent development executive, and leadership coach who supports 21st century leaders navigating complex career environments. For today's Unposted, I am so excited to have Maliik Baraka on with us today, a former talent and equity coach at companies such as Google and Cox Communications, who now leads his own firm, Authenticity Unleashed Coaching. He also is the host of his own podcast, Beauty in the Beast, and a longtime colleague of mine at the Institute for Coaching Innovation. Welcome, Maliik. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here as well. And although I kind of feel from your description like you should have my wife because I thought of her when you said smart and spicy.
No, you keep it real. That's definitely why I wanted you on.
Well, I appreciate that, and yeah, it's an honor to be with you here on this platform, and excited to see what we will tackle today.
Me too. Me too. So I asked you on today to discuss men and vulnerability in leadership because my hot take is that traditional leadership encourages and rewards functional disassociation. It
Uh,
can be anyone can be susceptible to that, but I find that particularly men in leadership tend to consider their central nervous system more of a distraction to be silenced rather than the high fidelity data stream that it actually is. And what we often label as strength in leadership, especially in the corporate environment, is really a refusal to read the room's most important metrics, which is, how people are responding, what their body language is saying, kind of what the vibe is telling us. So my question to you is, if we look at our central nervous system as a source of data, what, in your opinion, or why are male leaders in particular like kind of terrified to explore that specific data set around vulnerability?
oh, I love the way that you framed it, and the way you're tapping into it from a scientific angle. I think that's really smart. And I think that what I've observed in my experience is when you think about it in that way of what metrics they might be ignoring, what I think fundamentally I've observed is that there is a lack of development of relationship with themselves. Oftentimes they are focusing on these external relationships, right? And the way that they are shaping those external relationships are really from an outmoded playbook, right? It's have to show up in this certain way because this is what it means to be professional. This is what strength looks like. This is what competence looks like. This is what fearlessness looks like. And all of these uh, different things that go into this persona that they've crafted over time, which now feel more like anything else to be armor that they're wearing, right? So they're walking into the room wearing this armor, which they believe makes them feel strong, makes them feel powerful, but miss the fact that that armor also blocks them from real connection with the people that they're trying to lead, right? It also clouds or shields them from dealing with what might actually be going on within themselves, right? So when you talk about that central nervous system and the data that that's providing to them, it's ignored because those things, I believe, trigger ideas of weakness, vulnerability considered to be weakness, uh, fear considered to be weakness, uncertainty considered to be weakness. And so there's this whole dance, this whole show that they're really putting on with themselves because we all know that as humans, and there's so much insecurity, there's so much doubt, there's so much fear. And for us to not acknowledge that and to just move forward in a way to where we're trying to mask it from others and even mask it from ourselves, it's just not smart and just not healthy.
I really appreciate drawing that observation of like, it's not just a mask for others. Your perspective that it's also a mask for themselves. How might that be, potentially not only causing harm to others in terms of what they are modeling as
Mhm.
leaders, but also what is the toll and cost to themselves of denying the very fundamental human need for connection and relational understanding?
Yeah, I think that the cost is really immense. Like when we take the time to really break down the layers of the cost that it pays to the folks around you, but more importantly to yourself, to your star player, as I like to name it. Like if you can't be honest with yourself, be true to yourself, be able to express yourself in a way that emits what lies at your core value system, it creates this internal disruption, right? This dissonance within yourself that if y- if you don't have command of that, how can you then take command or control or even influence in a positive way what's happening around you, right? Like it has to start internally, I believe. So part of that, going back to, as I said, the relationship with yourself, right? Like knowing who you are, knowing what's important to you, understanding what triggers you, understanding what you're afraid of, understand what brings you joy. Like really being in tune with all of those things is really the secret sauce of what you bring to the table as a professional. Before we even talk about leading others, it's what your secret sauce is as a professional, right? So being able to tap into that, then to understand, okay, this is who I am. Now let me lead with curiosity, not command. Let me lead with curiosities as it pertains to the folks that are in my charge. Let me seek to understand their values, right? What motivates them? What brings them joy? What triggers them? What are they afraid of? So then when you're in understanding of that and you can walk into that with clarity, then you can start to collaborate and influence in a different way. And you can focus on effective input into your folks so that in the output really tends to take care of itself.
It's so true because every word you were speaking, I kept thinking of this client that I had that I started working with. He came from a military background, so kind of his default leadership style had always been more of a command and control approach. He made a deliberate decision to start um, trying a different path. And
Mhm.
we worked together on establishing some more of those human-centered behaviors that drive relational power. So like one of the concepts that I talk about in coaching with executives and leaders is there's three kinds of power. There's your positional power, which is your title, how big your team is, everything on paper, more or less, that says you have authority. Then there is your expertise power, which is it obvious to others that you know how to do your job, right? Are you the point person that people go to when they need an answer on something that's accurate and useful? Expertise power is incredibly important, right? You need to prove your expertise power, but relational power is where it's at. Relational power is where influence lies. And influence is the difference of getting shit done as a senior executive and remaining more in the realm of the individual contributor that is more concerned with the task and the doing and the execution, right? So I find a lot of what you were saying to be reminiscent of the work I was doing with this man because he had come so far and he was seeing so many positive results, not only in with his team, interpersonally, but the output that they were creating, that it was disconcerting when he came to me last year and said, "We need to talk." Because apparently I'm not demanding enough. Apparently I'm not aggressive enough. Apparently, these are things that they want to see more of demonstrated from me with my team. So I guess part of where I'm going with this is, have you seen a similar trajectory or shift in priorities in terms of what is expected of leaders and how they're showing up? And is there, you know, I guess it comes down to that old adage of, are leaders defined by their character or their competence?
Mm. Yeah. Oh, that's good. I've certainly seen it. Uh, And I love what you said about power, and the three dimensions of that. I believe that all three are real. They have real life impacts. But and from my perspective, the first two are illusions. They're illusions created by the framework that you sit in, right? So my title only has power because they say, respect this title, right? So it's not true power. To me, that third dimension that you talked about, that's where the real power lies. It lies in that human connection, right? And so when we think about that juxtaposed with what the feedback leaders are getting, is the concern really that you are not in command and control? Or are we not getting the output that we need from your team? Right? Because we know for sure that command and control is just one method of leadership. And I mean, we could still do it. It's not the most uh, efficient. It's not, it doesn't create the best team culture. It doesn't sustain you as long as some other modes. It might not, to your point about central nervous system, it might not completely feel best aligned with you, but it is a tool. It is a method that can produce results. But what does it cost? What is the cost of you using a tool that doesn't feel like the best tool for you to utilize for your style, for your values, right? For your vision of what leadership looks like. And for the leaders that, I've dealt with that have said, well, I haven't gotten my feedback is that my team isn't producing the way they need to produce. It hasn't been because they haven't used that tool of command and control. It's something's in the way of them making a connection with their team and being able to lead their team in the way to track to whatever those metrics should be, like whatever that desired outcome is. And typically, it is something that they're stuck in internally, right? So we dig then, okay, what's in your way? What's in your way of showing up as the leader you want to show up as with your team to take your team where you want to take them and we know they want to go. Something stuck there.
There's so many things I want to like pull as threads from what you're saying.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but I love this idea of like tools, right? Because I think that people can get locked into this idea of like, well, you need to identify a leadership style. And when you've hit on it, that's it. That's the one. That's the one that you're always going to use for everything, for every situation, every individual, right? And you raise a really fair point, which is there is absolutely a place for command and control. Command and control is an approach that is hyper focused on efficiency and productivity. And typically, when you are in a high stakes, high risk, high pressure, high visibility moment, um, it is the appropriate default, right? Because you're in a crisis, more or less. And I think what's happened is that went from that being the default model for, you know, strength and gravitas and capability in leadership born from post World War II militaristic values. But we also see like this other shift of there were people who were seeing the results of like moving away from that into more of their relational power. And
That's right.
how in this current moment, you have leaders who maybe came up in more of the command and control style and see everything as a fire to be put out because that's the only way that they know how to lead. Right. So they almost like conform the situation to meet their style versus the opposite.
That's right.
Um, and then you have leaders who I think are grappling with this new um, unspoken expectation that, well, yes, because we are hyper focused on performance and productivity and efficiency, anything that could indicate more of a relational approach, you know, be it through seeking connection or understanding others' perspectives, like that's all seen as barriers to efficiency.
Hmm.
So again, like what is the toll that we're putting on ourselves and men in particular of trying to meet this moment? What is the sacrifice to their own humanity and how can we start to help them either sustain or rebuild it?
I mean, it's a great question, and I think that the toll is immense. I think that it's widespread. It's a lot of suffering in silence because, again, to name it for many feels like a sign of weakness. And I think that what is largely being missed is that it can come off as cliche, but cliches have truth, right? Like when you talk about it all being about relationships, I mean, it really is about relationships. And I can't emphasize enough that, man, that first relationship that you have with yourself is the key piece. It's the key piece. You you know, and I would also want to flag that when you were talking about the tools and how there's do you make your style fit situation, or do you adapt your style? I mean, or do you force your style on the situation? It made me think about coaching in sports because I'm a football guy. So when a head coach inherits a team, the head coach can say, okay, this is the style of offense and defense I want my team to run. And so he plugs people into that style of offense and defense. And what you'll see more often than not is that team doesn't win because more often than not, he doesn't have the right players to execute the style of offense and defense that he wants to run. What a smart head coach will do is say, okay, here are the players that I have now. Let me put in the offense and defense systems that best utilize the players that I have. But as I recruit, I can then bring in players that are going to be better aligned to the style of offense and defense that I know could ultimately win me a championship. But what I'm not going to do is try to make these players fit into a system that's not right for them. That's not going to maximize their talents because I have a sense of what my players bring to the table. I think that it overlays to leadership teams so well, but the key piece in that is that coach has to understand his team enough, understand itself enough to understand, okay, this is where I want to go. How do I get us there? I'm not going to drag them kicking and screaming there because there's going to be so much collateral damage in my way. But I'm going to smartly connect with, understand, amplify, bring in talent to close gaps to get us in a place where we all can feel good about where we're going and more importantly, how we're getting there.
as I mentioned earlier, we're kind of taking the lens of men in leadership, but vulnerability is something that I think most leaders struggle with to a degree. I see it happens to be more pronounced in the male persuasion. How do you see that maybe conflating or overlapping with leadership courage? Having the bravery to do what's right or to do what the situation best calls for, even if it is unpopular, or even if you don't have all the data that confirms for you that this is the way to go. What are your thoughts on that?
What came up for me as you were asking that question was, I remember having a conversation with my son when he was about, say, about 11 years old, give or take a year. You know, my son had always been very much a rule follower, but my son, like most kids, feared getting in trouble. So from time to time, if he did something that didn't meet the mark, he would lie about it, as many kids do. And I remember he had lied about something, and it wasn't something big, but it was something where I obviously knew that he was lying. And in that moment, instead of punishing him for lying, as I had pretty much done in the past, it felt like we were at a critical juncture. So what I said to him was, man, I know that you're young and you got a lot to learn. You got a lot of years ahead of you. But like right now, you got to start thinking about the type of man you want to be.
Amen.
Like, do you want to be the type of man that lies his way out of situations, who is known to be a liar? Or do you want people to take you at your word? Do you want to be able to stand for what you believe in? Right? Like, you got to make a decision because I can't decide this for you. What type of man do you want to be? I firmly believe that changed the trajectory, and not to say he never lied again, but I could start to see him move differently and accountability becoming something more present for him. I share that to say that when we think about, men in leadership, it boils down to like, who do you want to be? Do you want to be the leader that does anything to get to the top, that steps on people, that that doesn't lead with honor, that has a reputation for getting it done, but leaving damage in your wake? Or do you want to be the leader that motivates people, that connects people, that people want to follow, that people want to be like when they become leaders? And I think that that's so often missed. Like, people think about oftentimes, what's next for me? What's next on the in as I climb this ladder or navigate this jungle gym? What's next for me, and how can I get there? And what do I need to do to get there? Let me do that thing. But as I literally was just saying to a young leader that I was having a conversation with today, she just stepped into a leadership role for the first time, and I'm like, you can take the shortcut, you can solve for something quickly, but don't miss the opportunity to do the most important thing as your job as a leader, which is how you pour into other people, what you're modeling for them.
Absolutely. So, this might be kind of an appropriate bow for this
Yeah.
conversation because you reminded me of I met with someone that two mutual acquaintances had kind of brought us together to talk about leadership and coaching and all of that. And, when asked about what his aspirations are for showing up as a leader himself, he's like, I always kind of gauged it as if I ran into this person years down the road, years after they were on my team, randomly just out, in the world, would they want to stop and say hello to me and see how I was doing?
Come on.
And it's I
Yeah.
guess it comes back to what Maya Angelou said, right? People will always remember how you made them feel. And maybe that's like the takeaway is that, because I will say the vast majority of men in leadership that I work with want to be seen as aspirational, not just as a leader, but as a man. So, I think that that is constantly a script that's running, but it feels safer to default to the tactical. It feels safer to keep the distance. It feels safer to, keep it, transactional. But I find that that's the disconnect of where your team doesn't really know where you're coming from in terms of trustworthiness, because you're so worried about being perceived as not having all the answers or not showing up as strong. You don't realize that you're not giving your team what they need to succeed. I think that there is a path forward. I think that we're in a weird time right now, but I have hope that because the desire is there to not lose the humanity and to keep moving towards that, that hopefully more people will start to feel like that is a safer place to explore.
Yeah, I think that for people who still kind of live by that idea of I'm not here to make friends, they're missing it. Because what really they are saying behind that is people don't have to like me. And that's bullshit. Like
Thank you for
people
saying it.
don't yeah, people don't have to necessarily invite you over their home for, Sunday dinner, and they don't have to
Thank
buy you Christmas gifts. But yeah, they should like you, man. People like to do business with people they like. They like to work with people that they like. So just having a sense of decency, of humility, of care of empathy for the fellow humans that you're working with, like it should be non-negotiable. Like like the idea that you can just show up thinking that, oh, I'm this high performer and I'm so smart and I can put all these things together and I can strategize and I can, move boost the profit margin and all of these things, and I don't have to worry about likability. Like, fam, get that shit out of here. Like that's so dead, and you are a dinosaur walking if you're still approaching work in that way, because you're not just there to boost profit margins, one, but also if your idea is I'm just here to boost profit margins, you can't boost profit margins without effectively connecting with people. And you leave so much on the table if you're not taking the time to cultivate relationships. You leave so much on the table if you're not taking time to invest in people the same way someone or someone's invested in your ass at some point. Like,
True.
these ideas of bootstrap and it's being self-made, like, I hate those narratives. I hate those narratives that are so prominent in our culture right now because they're fallacies. No one is self-made. No one does it by themselves. We need each other. Someone always gets help. Unless you're out in the woods in a cabin by yourself, living off the grid, then I'll give you the nod and say, yep, you're doing it by yourself. You're self made. But if you are maneuvering in a society of people, it's just impossible and it's ridiculous and it's a waste of energy and it's a waste of time. Stop with those false narratives. Figure out who you are, what you want, love yourself so that you can spread love to others. And then you will be amazed at what you see develop from that, of the innovation, of the creativity, of the collaboration, of how it grows the culture, which then fuels the business.
Ooh, 100%. It just so often goes unsaid. And it sometimes comes as a surprise when I tell leaders, hey, you know what? You can relax because everybody already knows you're not perfect. Nobody's perfect. So don't think that you're pulling the wool over anybody's eyes here. Right? Like that's meant to kind of help them relax into the reality of like, yeah, they're not going to hit it out of the park every single time, every single decision, they're going to fuck up sometimes. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to make bad calls. There's so much kind of embedded in there that is culturally motivated, societally programmed. It's just something that I'm so glad that I was able to explore with you in this space here. You bring such wisdom to the dialogue that I can't thank you enough. Before I go, are there any maybe best practices or insights that you would want to share? Maybe there's somebody out there watching right now who is in a leadership role and they're struggling with how to create comfort with vulnerability in a professional sense. Is there anything that you would suggest or offer to them as insight that they could carry forward?
Yeah, that's a, just another great question. I think first off, I want men to understand that therapy is a, a real thing. It's not witchcraft. It's not weakness. It's not any of the things that, we have been taught over the years, especially for folks that are, of my era and maybe even older. It's it's such a valuable tool. In fact, I would name it as an invaluable tool with you understanding yourself, understanding your whys, understanding what are truly your ideas, thoughts, beliefs, and feelings versus those that have been handed to you by someone else. I want them to understand that rest, rest, rest is critical. It's not negotiable. I was just at a workshop this past weekend, and the workshop facilitator just said it so smartly of, you think of our bodies as machines. You cannot run a machine 24/7. It is engineeringly impossible to run that machine 24/7. Like it has to have periods of rest or it will break. We have to give ourselves the appropriate amount of rest. We have to take care of ourselves so that we can show up in a way that we truly want to show up. And lastly, I will say that it's okay to break the mold. It's okay to break the mold and it's okay to be whomever you feel you want to be as a person and as a leader. And that in breaking that mold and breaking through that layer is where not only your freedom lies, but that's where your superpower truly resides.
I could not have picked a better soundbite to end on. Thank you so much again for joining me today for this important conversation. If you've stayed with us this long and you've hung out, thanks so much for checking out Unposted. Please like, subscribe, and share with a like minded learner. Thanks. We'll see you next time.